Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So yesterday I released my list of my most consistent decks on my climb this season from rank 70 to 140, and one that came as a surprise to me while I was running it, and I'm sure it came as a surprise to you guys on that list, is the Lockjaw rotation Jane Foster deck. And this one is a little bit different than a normal build. A lot of times you have some lower end cards. You have Jubilee, you have Sunspot, you have Chavez for a little bit more consistency. But this version takes out and kind of cuts out all of those weaker flips so that every single time you flip a card, you can be sure that you're going to get good value out of it. That way you can slowly and strategically flip your cards or hold them until the end of the game, and then you can flip one big lane for a very big power push, potentially a double trigger of Thor, a Dr. Doom trigger. You can just push a lot of power where it will typically surprise the opponent. Now, the biggest reason for the cut of Jubilee here is previously Jubilee could be used as kind of a Hail Mary. If you didn't have Lockjaw by 4, you could always throw Jubilee down. If it pulled into Lockjaw, it used to function where it would go ahead and cycle that Jubilee back into your deck, and now it doesn't. And so then you can either have just a 1 power card on the board no matter what you pull. Sometimes you flip into her as your last card and it's just very lackluster. And then if it gets hit with a leech, then it's just a very, very low power card in your hand. And so overall, this deck has done really well against really any main meta matches. The biggest issues could potentially be a Galactus if you don't have Arrow in hand. Sometimes it can't match the high roll potential of a Zabu or a Silver Surfer deck, but also a lot of times it can surprise the opponent by pushing power into lanes that they weren't anticipating or expecting it, and being able to squeak and squeeze out wins in those scenarios. So we're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have the God Banana himself. The first location is the hot location right now, so you may see it a couple of times, and it actually works against this deck in a lot of scenarios. Typically you don't have a lot of initiative or a lot of power push on the first couple of turns, and so you're usually going to lose Asgard. And so it will be in this video, but it's not a main build around it. This deck probably functions and serves better outside of this featured location. And so we do have the second location as the Sanctum Sanctorum, which it looks like they're running a Zabu Hawk deck. And Sanctum Sanctorum is fantastic for this deck. We have multiple ways to sneak power into those locations, and we can squeeze that power out. Now, since we don't have the competition between our Lockjaw or our Thor here, we're actually going to go ahead and play Thor on curve on 3. And then typically I like to hold Killmonger until the very end as an easy cycle tool. If I use Lockjaw on turn 6, that lets me use my Wasp, my Mjolnir, and my Killmonger to rotate all 3 of those. But in this scenario, I think we're going to try to take out the Korg. I don't think we're going to win Asgard. I think they will probably drop a Hawk here, and it's going to be a 14 power Hawk, and we're not going to be able to match up against that much power. But I am going to go ahead and just drop our Killmonger. No, so they end up doing a Rock Slide to send us more rocks, which, I mean, are okay in a Lockjaw rotation deck because, honestly, they're not the worst thing that we could get. I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to rotate actually just one. We're going to rotate Mjolnir. I thought about rotating both, but we do have 3 rocks in our deck. Actually 2. We drew 1 from Korg, so we have 2 left in our deck that are clogging up some of those good value flips. We want to keep some space in case we draw back into Mjolnir. That way we can drop our Dr. Doom and our Mjolnir on that last turn. And for me, Vision is a little bit too aggressive. At least in this matchup. We want, and we're fairly confident that we can win overall, we want to make sure that they don't know that we can sneak power into the Sanctum Sanctorum. If we throw Vision, then they know exactly how much power we're going to have over there, and they'll have to beat us in both of their lanes. At least this way, it'll be a little bit of a surprise. They can suspect we have Dr. Doom, but they don't know that we have it for sure. And so we actually do get the good Hulk flip there, and so very, very good flip for us. We're going to go ahead and play the Dr. Doom. That will push 5 power here and here. And then while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and cycle our Wasp as well. We do have the 2 rocks that we can potentially cycle into. We also have our Infinite and some really strong plays that will allow us to win the Sanctum Sanctorum and the Limbo location. Oh, actually, we have an extra turn here. So I'm actually just going to do the Dr. Doom in this scenario. we're not going to cycle both. We're just going to play our Giganto. I changed my mind again. We're going to do Dr. Doom. We're going to rotate. This will probably flip into a rock just based on how we got lucky with the Hulk last time. Odds are we won't get lucky again. But we are going to cycle the one card. They could... Oh, no. They're doing a double Spider-Man lock here, aren't they? We should have went with the arrow play, right? Oh, no. Okay, no, it's Mystique. That's actually okay. So we do have our Mjolnir. If this is... No, it's Maria Hill. So they're buffing up their hand again. We're very confident. We are very, very confident in this scenario. We can actually... If we thought they were just going to be doing one drop, we could do arrow here. That's 7. If they only drop 1, we make sure we pull it over. We have Mjolnir to buff this up by 6 more. And then we rotate. We could potentially draw into our Dr. Doom again and push more power wide. Just a very good rotation, a very good flip. And just because you can flip, you notice that I've had Wasp for a while and I didn't necessarily flip it. It's always a potential bad flip. If you flip both your Mjolnir and your Wasp, you could potentially lock in your Mjolnir or a 0 power play in that lane. Typically, I like to leave some room for some extra rotations. If you cap out your Lockjaw lane too early, that takes away a lot of the mystery that you have in the deck and the uncertainty that it gives the opponent. So we will take the 1 cube. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one, and we'll play it a little bit more aggressively. All right, next up we have Corporate. And the first location is Machine World, which isn't great if we go with the Dracula path, because then they could flood us with some very low value cards like Korg that would potentially be pulled into instead of our Infinite. And so Dracula in this list is more of a backup kind of plan rather than the main goal. Something like a Zabu list wants Dracula to trigger every single time. This one is just a decent addition. So we are going to invest even further into Asgard. They could play Zabu here, and if so, then I think they just have us beaten in Asgard. I don't think we can trigger it. But Mojo World is a great lane for our Lockjaw. That way we can rotate our tools pretty easily. We can typically flood that lane. We can cap it out in most scenarios. And so since Dracula is not going to help us gain initiative or push any additional power into Asgard, we're going to go ahead and play it into the Mojo World location. If we do lose Asgard, that's fine. That's not a huge hit. And they actually use a Black Widow to make sure that even if we win Asgard, we're not going to get the upside from it. And so a decent play line. But we are going to be able to more easily cap out the Mojo World location. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play our Widow's Bite and our Jane Foster. That will guarantee that we pull into our Mjolnir. Next turn, we could do our Mjolnir, our Wasp, a Rock, and Vision to give Dracula fewer targets to pull into. So if the next card we draw is something big like our Giganto, our Hulk, then we have a really good guaranteed pull from Dracula. And as long as they don't Spider-Man lock us out of this lane, we're absolutely fine. And so they do go with a Sarah, which is kind of interesting. This looks like a Hawk deck, but it looks like maybe they didn't hit their high roll. And so instead of Vision here, I think what we're going to go with is Arrow. We're going to yank whatever they play here and here out of this lane. We're going to buff up our Thor even further with the Mjolnir. We're going to play the Wasp. And then our Dracula is guaranteed to pull into one of these 2 cards. But as long as they don't play more than 3 cards this turn, then they're not going to have Mojo World capped out anyways. So we're going to go ahead and lock this in. They do only play 2 cards. So if one is Shang-Chi, one is any kind of counter card, we are going to yank it out of their ideal location and guarantee that we win Mojo World by 100. And we already have the significant lead in Asgard. And so they do use Hawk. They use Rock Slide to push it up even further. And we actually get the high roll of the Infinite pull from our Dracula. So we will take those 2 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Demao Mao. And the first location is the Avengers Compound. We start with our Lockjaw in our opening hand, which doesn't happen all the time. With this deck, without having Chavez for that consistency, there are a lot of games where either you don't draw into your Lockjaw, you draw into it very late. You have to work around that kind of restriction, but it gives you a higher high roll as a result. And so without having Jane Foster, we have both Lockjaw and Thor. So whenever I first started running this deck, my biggest question was, which do I drop first? Do I drop the Lockjaw? Do I start rotating? Do I drop Thor? But for me, the main idea is that if I have Jane Foster and I have both of them, I can guarantee that I get Mjolnir, and so I want less of a chance to naturally draw into it because I do have Jane Foster to lean in on. If I don't, then I do want a better chance to naturally draw into Mjolnir so we have that extra rotation or cycle tool with our Lockjaw. And so we are going to play our Thor first. They play into the miniaturized lab with their Maria Hill. amazing Maria Hill variant, by the way. And they do have the Zabu. And so we are going against a very common meta deck. We have a couple of options here. Unfortunately, I don't think either one allows us to win Asgard, but we're going to give it a shot. Typically, I don't like to stack these two cards together, the Thor and the Lockjaw, because both of those are your kind of big power potential, your big power pushes. And stacking them together gives the opponent a lot of very valuable information. Plus, it's always nice to cycle a full lane with Lockjaw on the last turn, let's say in Miniaturized Lab, and then you push an insane amount of power there, and in the process, help support your other two lanes. But in this scenario, I thought it was a little bit more advantageous for us to go ahead and cycle, try to get the Asgard win. That's going to restrict the Mau Mau from getting any of his additional resources. And we do have the alternative play line of the Dracula, potentially. Now it is going to be a gamble of what that card pulls into. And so we are going to just play our Dracula this turn, and then we will look at the potential last turn play line, whether that be pulling cards over into the Avengers compound, whether that be doing a Doctor Doom to help support this lane and this one, which I think is what we go with. We have a couple of chances to pull into some really powerful cards in the Avenger compound. We have Hulk, and if they don't invest anything else into the Avengers compound, the Doctor Doom will help us swing and win that location. If they don't invest into the Miniaturized Lab, then, so the Shang-Chi comes down. We do have one rotation, but I don't think we have any great cards to lean in on here. And so they do play the Collector as well. I think that is enough to beat us, unfortunately. The Jane Foster flip actually gives us the win in that lane. Mjolnir's going to trigger, so we buff up our Thor, and then it comes down to, do we get lucky? The Mau Mau deserved that win. Oh man, I'm not even gonna fist bump because that's just in poor. Okay, they fist bumped first. I wasn't gonna fist bump first because I felt like that was in poor taste. But had we drawn into anything else, the Hulk would not have done it. That took a 1 out of 6 to find that win, and just, we'll take it. Sometimes you take luck, but that should not have been how that one happened. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Shane Schaefer. The first location is the vault, and so typically I like to, if we have our Doctor Doom, typically I like to kind of feign a little bit of weakness in that lane and make it look like we are not going to win the vault location. As long as we are within 5, then we can sneak it away with a Doctor Doom. A lot of times you can do kind of some sneaky misdirection. So whereas on a normal game we would want to push our Thor there just so that we have that additional power, I'm going to try to do a little bit sneakier of a play, and we'll do Thor. We might use Arrow to pull whatever card they could potentially drop on 4 out or 5 out. I don't know for sure. But what I do know is that we want to make it look like we've lost the vault, and then we lean into the Doctor Doom play. That is how we're going to potentially get the biggest cube gain here, and I think it gives us the most strategic possible positioning. So we, of course, draw into our Mjolnir. I'm not going to play it. We're just going to go ahead and skip. Right now, they haven't played anything additional into the vault. And then they do play She-Hulk. So even if we play Jane Foster there, that is not going to give us what we need. That would only end up giving us exactly 13. So if they invested anything additional there, it wouldn't be enough to win. So I'm actually going to play Jane Foster just into Limitless. We get the 1 additional power on that card over the Arrow play. And actually, we could have forced the tie in the vault, and we could have snuck in that extra 5 power in Lamentus for the win there. Unfortunately, we did not go with that play line, but they did lock us out of Lamentus. So the Arrow tech could be what we need to find our win. So they snapped. They have all of the resources. They can play 1 decent-sized card. We have initiative, so if it's Shang-Chi, then it will take out our Thor. We will lose. But if they're wanting to invest into Lamentus, knowing that they have it locked down and that they want to overcome that 8 power, then we're going to be able to yank that card out with our Arrow and find our win instead. And so they do play into Lamentus, so I expect this to be maybe a Hawk or something decently sized. It is the Hawk play line. And even if they had gotten the Hawk off into Lamentus, They forgot that both of our decks are empty because of Limitless 1, and so it wasn't going to be able to be enough to overpower them. Even if we had the average cards of 3, 4, or 5, it wouldn't have been enough. But just kind of unfortunate. Let's go ahead and take those 4 cubes. We'll jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Invalid G, and the first location is Luke's Bar, which is actually pretty decent for Thor. Other than him being a prime target for a Shang-Chi play, if we can play Thor early and we draw into his Mjolnir early, we can continue to play that onto the board and push additional value. Now, to win Luke's Bar, we're going to need something like Vision or Doctor Doom, and we do get lucky. We pull into the Vision, and so we're going to go ahead and play our Thor. That's going to give us a chance to start drawing into our Mjolnir. Next turn, we will go with a Dracula. We also have Doctor Doom and Vision. We can make the decision of if we want to surprise them with the power that we can push into Luke's Bar, or if we want to let them know that we can move Vision over. A lot of times, if I think I can win off of kind of that surprise factor, I'll opt to not drop Vision if I have Doctor Doom already in hand and already ready to go. And so they cap out the Savage Land location. I can imagine that this is a Silver Surfer deck and that they're wanting to buff up their Bishop and their Nakia. So they can drop Silver Surfer this turn, bounce it back into their hand, and I don't think that's going to be enough for them. Because we do have the Doctor Doom that we're most likely going to go with next turn, I'm going to play Jane Foster into Washington, D.C. Now, if we just leave Wasp onto the board, she actually gets a pretty big buff and bonus from Washington, D.C. And so they did snap. So they play Okoye and Killmonger, which does clear them some additional space in the Savage Land. Now, if they have Brood and Silver Surfer, they will be able to push what they could be using as a surprise factor into Luke's Bar. And if that's the case, we might not have the win, but I do think we still shoot for it. We have 3 decent targets for our Dracula to pull into in our Hulk, our Infinite, and our Vision. We have 1 out of 4 to pull into a 3 power card. We are going to sneak some power into Luke's Bar. We sneak additional power across the lanes with our Doctor Doom. We have the Wasp to buff up the Washington, D.C. lane. And maybe we can sneak out the win. Now, they don't push anything into Luke's Bar. I'm assuming they didn't pull into their Brood. And so between the Mjolnir and the Wasp, we actually tie in Washington, D.C., which is kind of incredible. And then we do get the high roll, again, the 1 out of 4 shot to pull into our Infinite. Not that we necessarily needed it, we just needed a good overall push. We actually needed either the Infinite or the Hulk there, and we got lucky once again. We will take luck from time to time. That is where this deck list can kind of push some additional cubes, is that uncertainty with Dracula. The amount of power that it can push on the last turn can oftentimes take the opponent by surprise, and honestly, how consistent it is one of those surprise elements as well. So we are going to take those 4 cubes. That is where we're going to go ahead and end the video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. And as always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.